And thank you everybody for joining us. We are up to Parsha Ki Seitzei. Starts on page 10,046 in the Blue English Chumash, and in the English side is 1047. So Parsha Ki Seitzei actually is a very dear parsha to me personally because it's actually my bar mitzvah parsha, right? I was born. And actually, not exactly my bar mitzvah parsha is Ki Savo, but my birthday it was that year. My bar mitzvah was Sunday night, my Hebrew birthday. So to just make everything much easier, so my parents made my Shabbos the week before. So I didn't lay in the whole parsha, which between me and you, I was happy about. Right? I just lay in the mafter and the Haftorah, right? And then we had Sunday night, we had the whole celebration. So it was just easier for family coming out of town just to make instead of having to wait a whole week. So it's a little dear to me, this parsha, because many years ago, I got bar mitzvah, more than 30 years ago, right? Got bar mitzvah, so it has a special place in my heart. But Parsha Ki Seitzei also is sort of, as we spoke about last week, it continues along the same lines as Mishpatim, where it has a lot of commandments. Just a quick recap, the book of book of Leviticus is very different than the other four books, where the book of Leviticus starts off where Moshe Rabbeinu is giving a recant of what happened to the Jewish people, and he does it in a singular tense. We spoke about Hashem Amar Allah, God spoke to me. He speaks in a personal way, and he gives over from his perspective how everything happened. And there are mitzvot sprinkled in there, but it's not a lot of mitzvot. And up until really Parshas Mishpatim, which was last week's Parsha, where it starts giving, Shoftim, not Mishpatim, Parsha Shoftim, right, where it starts throwing in more halacha, right, more like laws. And again, Parsha Ki Seitzei continues with this. But the interesting thing is, and it's something to focus on, and you'll see, a lot of these mitzvos have to do with living in Eretz Yisrael. Right? A lot of these mitzvahs have to do because Moshe is saying now you're on the doorstep of going into Eretz Yisrael. Right? We are about to get there. And some of them might be applicable outside of Eretz Yisrael, some must only in Eretz Yisrael, but a lot of them have to do with living in Eretz Yisrael. And it's just very interesting to see, right? It's the mitzvah of going to war, last week's parsha, the mitzvah of having a king. This week's parsha starts off with Ki Seitzei L'malchama L'ovech, when you go to war with your enemy, right? And then it goes through other laws and we'll go through some of them, other laws that are applicable for that are more applicable to a culture of running a government, running a society, right, in the Torah way, than the mitzvah of Shabbos, which, don't get me wrong, is one of the three main mitzvahs. Of course, we have to keep it, right? But these mitzvahs are structured in a way where it's mitzvahs of how to be able to live as a nation in a land and structure. It's very interesting, goes through a lot of those halachos, and as we get closer to the end and going into Eretz Yisrael, there is a theme that even though sort of the book of Devarim doesn't really speak about mitzvahs, as we say, right, but it does because it speaks about these mitzvahs that we're going to the land of Israel. We're going to talk about a few of them. So the one I want to start off with, last year we spoke a little bit about the beginning of the parsha, and so I want to talk about a few other things that we didn't speak about last year. So if you go to page 1048, if you turn the page, it's a very interesting halacha. So verse 22 and verse 23, right? So the halacha is like this. If someone has done a sin that the punishment is death, of hanging, right? And after the tulio sal eitz, and you hung him on a tree, right? So the halacha is lo sala nevilasa ala eitz. You should not leave the body, the nevel, which is now the lifeless body, on the tree overnight. Right? You can't leave him overnight, right? But you have to go ahead and bury him. This is like a curse against Hashem, right? And you have to go ahead and bury him because on this land that Hashem gave him, you'll bury him in this land. So the commentaries expand on this halacha. First of all, it's a humane thing. I mean, it's humane. You shouldn't have bodies laying around. right? But there's something very deep that goes on here because the Torah says, right, God makes it very personal. Right? We don't find this in a lot of places. Hashem makes this very personal. He says, "Kikila selokimhu." It's like a curse against Hashem. It's like a disgrace to Hashem, right? About having the body just hanging there and staying overnight. We have to have it until night, and then they take it down, and then they bury it. What's this like disgrace against Hashem more than any other mitzvah that someone doesn't do? And theoretically, anytime we don't do what Hashem wants us, it should be a little disgrace to Hashem. What's the greater disgrace to Hashem over here that the Torah goes ahead and verbalizes it and expresses it in this mitzvah? And the commentary says something so powerful. It says, and in the mitzvah itself, it brings out a tremendous lesson. Because we know that God created us, we're all nivra b'tselem Elokim, we're all created in the image of Hashem. So when the body is left up hanging, right, you have to, it has to be up for a little bit to, for people to learn the lesson and to, we have to watch, we have to do what Hashem tells us to do, right? But then after that, to leave it up overnight and just to sort of let sort of rot, even though you might take it the next day, but sort of just leave it. No one's walking around at night. At night is not where there's any lesson. It's a disgrace to the body, and the body is an image of Hashem. Right? So when there was a disgrace to the body, there's a disgrace to Hashem because He created us. And everybody knows that it's being hung because it didn't do the right thing. Because if someone does the right thing and they pass away, they get buried right away. So there's a automatic disgrace to the body, and that disgrace then becomes a disgrace to Hashem. So therefore, Hashem says, kills, it's like disgrace to me. And therefore, we have to go ahead and you have to go and bury it. You have to go ahead and bury it. So the commentaries take out from here how important it is important for us to realize that every human being is made in the image of Hashem. Every human being is created in the image of Hashem, and how careful we have to be not to disgrace someone, not to put someone down, right? Not to mimic them, or to, even if they have some kind of deficiency or some kind of, unfortunately, they're born with some kind of their body, they're missing a hand or some kind of deformed something, they're still in the image of Hashem, and we can't make fun of them. We can't make fun of them, we can't put them down, right? Or if they're different than us, we can't do that because you're disgracing Hashem. Kulam nivra b'tselem Elokim, everybody's created in the image of Hashem. Right? And we learn, we see how far this goes, that Hashem says, when you don't take down that body, it's as if you're disgracing me. And I think this is something that we really have to really, first of all, educate our kids, which is extremely important because it's very easy to you have a kid in your class that has a lisp. You have a kid in your class that might, look a little different, might be a little chubby or too skinny or whatever it is, right? And it's common, unfortunately, for kids to start making fun of other kids. So first of all, it's bullying and it's hurting feelings, and that's for sure. But there's a deeper level over here. Not only that, but if we start taking that higher road in a positive way and say, look at it, think about it, you're really making fun of Hashem. Hashem created this person in His image. That's because he looks a little different than us, and He's still created in His image. And then if we take it to adulthood, teenager, or even adulthood, right, you have to think the same way. Now you're going to say, but so everybody's created in the image of Hashem, so we can't disagree with anybody. We can't feel that they're doing something wrong. One has nothing to do with the other, right? When I feel that someone is doing something wrong, I don't give them a cheap shot about something they did or how they look or things like that. You don't do that, right? Even though you could, and unfortunately our society will pick that up and make a whole big deal out of it, right? That's what our society does, and that's politicians do, right? To sort of get the edge on someone else. It's called dirty, being a politician. But because unfortunately that's society, and that's Lashon Hara, right, which we'll talk about a little later, right? But we can't do that, not only because it's wrong, but we're really making fun of Hashem. We're making fun of Hashem. So you could, if someone does something wrong and you're the person to speak to that person, you should talk to that person. If you're a parent and you're telling your child, you say, listen, that kind of action we don't do, but we don't talk about the individual, about how they look or the individual. We have to separate the two things, right? Because we are the image of Hashem, and that's what we learn from this parsha. The other thing on a side note, and it's not a side note, it's a halakha, and it's just something just to quickly speak about. We also learn from here that we have to try to bury someone as soon as possible. And if someone asks you, where in the Torah do we find that you have to bury someone and not cremate them? I know Mason just had a whole campaign for, against cremation. It's such an important thing. Living in Jacksonville a few times as a rabbi there, I had to, Baruch Hashem, I was able to convince a few families not to cremate. And I tell people that's the mitzvah I'm going to take up to Shemayim with me, right? But we see the Torah says you have to bury the person, even someone that does a Aveira, whatever it is. Everybody has to be buried. Right, and you should bury him on the Eretz, on the land that Hashem gave us. Right, that's Eretz Yisrael, but every land Hashem gave us. Right, so this is another place that we see that there is a mitzvah of burying someone. Right, that you're supposed to bury the person. Okay, any questions or comments? Okay, so let's move on. So we're going to move on to chapter 20. 1 second. Chapter 22, verse 8. So if you turn the page to 1050, so our Parsha class, we sort of jump around, right? Every time we jump around a little more. Sometimes we hang on one topic a little more. Sometimes we jump around a little more. It's sort of every class is slightly different. So the verse says over here, as we said, it's you build a new house, right? And you have a roof, not like my house where we sort of have a slanty roof and you can't go on the roof, right? But in Eretz Yisrael, it's like that a lot. And there's other houses, you have a flat roof, and so in theory, people could go up to the roof. Only if people could go into the roof. So then you have to build you have to build a fence, right, around the roof. Sisa, Michael Gagacha, make a fence for your roof. Right, lo sasim dam veisacha, that you should not allow blood to come from your house. Ki yipol nafal mimenu. Just in case if someone falls down, right, blood will come because of you. So you should not allow that, and therefore you should build a fence. So on the straightforward, it's a very practical halakha, right? It's a very practical halakha. You have a roof, you have a flat roof. People are going. You have a porch. Right, whatever it is, make sure that you have proper fencing. One could think, if you have a pool and, you have kids around, also you have to make sure that you have a fence. It sort of branches out to a lot of different places, a lot of different rules. The question that the commentaries ask is sort of a twofold question. Number one, right, seems like why is this a mitzvah? It's a mitzvah. It's one of the 613 mitzvot. Right? I understand tefillin. I understand, Shabbos. I understand kosher. I understand, even some business laws. But this is a very practical thing. A very practical thing. You have a place where someone could get injured. You have to make a roof, a fence around it. This is a mitzvah in the Torah. Right? This is a mitzvah. This is a practical thing. On the other hand, also one could ask is, if you're in my house, you be careful, right? Like I built my house. You were walking, and they would say if someone comes into your house and they fall down, right? If I don't want to put a fence on my roof, I'm not putting a fence on my roof, right? I have, I have my shotgun, and I want to, and you come onto my property. It's actually there is halacha. I don't want to get into that right now, right? That was a bad example, right? But first of all, it seems like a practical halacha, but on the other hand, you sort of take away my right. Why is it considered my blood if someone's not watching where they're going and they fall off my roof if there's no fence? So this halacha really brings out what is a mitzvah, and I want to expand on this a little bit. What is a mitzvah? Right? A lot of times we think a mitzvah is something that's spiritual. Right, something that's spiritual, putting on tefillin, lighting Shabbos candles, eating cholent on Shabbos, of course, right? Right. But something that's going to Israel and davening at the Kotel, right? Something that's spiritual, right? You speak to what is religion? That's something spiritual, right? That's what mitzvahs. That's what would be a mitzvah. And the answer is no. As Rav Noach Weinberg put it, mitzvahs are 613 ways of getting closer to Hashem. There's 613 ways to get closer to Hashem. Part of that is Hashem is telling us that building a fence around your house, around your roof, is, if I tell you to do that, so then when you do it because I told you to do that, you're getting closer to me because you're doing it because I told you to do that. Even if you say, well, of course I'm going to do that. That's so silly. Of course I'm going to do it. Or you're going to say, like, Why do I have to build it? Don't come into my house. Don't walk on my roof and don't fall down. It's my house. I can do what I want in my house. No, whichever way you look at it, right? If you go ahead and you build a fence around because Hashem told you to do it, that is getting closer to Hashem. Right? And it's 613 ways of getting closer to Hashem in our practical daily life. Right? And therefore, right, when we are honest in our business, and when we don't speak lashon hara, well, it's okay. That's lashon hara. It's a spiritual thing, but it's really, if you think about it, it's not. It's gossip. I'm not gossiping, right? So I'm not gossiping, or I'm speaking nice to someone. It is spiritual, right? We understand that our mouth is holy, and we're keeping our mouth holy. So, to our actions, everything that we do on a daily basis, we have an opportunity to go ahead and make that something spiritual. And last night I was learning with my chavrusa. We're learning the Kuzari, right? The Kuzari was written by Rabbi Yehuda Halevi in the 1100s. It's a big debate if it's a true story, if it's not, if it's archaeologists also. There's a area in by the Baltics near the Black Sea, right, which was from the year 500 to around the year 1000 was the country of Khuzar. Right, the Khuzar kingdom, and around the year 700 or something like that, the king of Khuzar had a dream saying that his intentions are good, but his actions are bad. Right, and he kept on having this dream. To make a long story short, he went ahead and he decided he's going to check out different religions. So he started off with the philosophers. Philosophy was a big thing back then. Right, he knocked them out. He went to Islam. He went to Christianity. He knocked them all out. And then he has a discussion with the Chacham, as it's written in the Kuzar. It's called the Chacham. And there's the whole sefer is about the back and forth that he had. And then eventually, legend tells us that the king converted to Judaism, and his whole kingdom converted to Judaism. And there's a whole kingdom of Jews in Khuzar, right, from the year probably about 700 to around 900. And then they said they got crushed by the Muslims and the Christians that were fighting, and they got crushed by them and sort of got lost to time. Now, if it's a true, they found coins that has a King Yosef, right? There's archaeologists have a whole thing, historians have a whole thing. Some historians believe that most of the Jews from Eastern Europe actually come from the Khuzar, right? And they're really from converts. Others disagree. It's a very fascinating topic. It's not our topic to give a whole class on the kingdom of Khuzar. There have been plenty of classes on it. Right, but whatever it is, Yehuda Halevi wrote down, be it if he used it as just a parable, or he used it actually from the conversation. And what we were learning last night, or he was talking about the question the Khuzar king asked him. He said, the Jews are so downtrodden, and they're so poor, and they're oppressed, and how could these be the chosen people? Right? How could these people be the chosen people? So he answered. There's a whole back and forth, but basically the point I want to bring out, he answers him and he says like this. He says, on the contrary, since they are so downtrodden and they're persecuted, and just by uttering one word, right, they could change their whole, especially back then, they could change their whole situation. Right, by just converting to Christianity or to Islam, right, whatever, because it was really divided at then. They could change their whole situation, their whole status, right, everything, and they don't do that. Just by not doing an action, right, they have elevated themselves to such a height and such a level from Hashem by not doing something. And then he continues, he says, and on the contrary, and then the mitzvahs that Hashem gave us and every action that we do, right, to serve Hashem, in hardship, and we all have different forms of hardship. It doesn't have to be money hardship. It could be a spiritual hardship. It could be a pressure hardship. It could be, some people say that our society is even harder than it was in Europe because there's so many things pulling. We do have so many opportunities to move away, and in Europe it was much harder. Right? So there's different kind of, every generation has different kind of hardships. Right? And by us doing those, whatever it is, that is what makes us closer to Hashem, and that's what a mitzvah is. Right? And therefore, the word kedusha of holiness, right, is used twice for two mitzvahs. What are those two mitzvahs that it's used for? Kiddush comes from the word kedusha. Kiddush is kadosh, kedusha, and kedushin in a wedding. Wine, right? I heard this first time from my father. It's a lot of people speak about this. First time I heard this from my father. Wine is really the most intoxicating thing. It could be used for the most physical thing in the world, right? To get drunk and to be low, but we could take that same thing, which is could be the most physical thing, and lowliness, and then act out and not be a good person, and make kiddush out of it and sanctify the day. Kiddushin, a marriage between a husband and a wife, which the act of a marriage could be the most disgusting thing. It could ruin families. It could be done in a bad way, and it could be, again, it could be low and dirty. Or if you do it in the right way, you do it in a marriage, and we have Hashem with us, it's kedusha. It's kedushin. We sanctify it. That is the power of the Jewish people. That's the power of a mitzvah. That is exactly what we do. We go ahead and we elevate the physical. We take a mundane thing of building a fence around the house, which seems simple, and we make that something special. We make that into a mitzvah. We take the most physical, pleasurable thing, which could be dirty and disgusting and not the proper way, and we make it holy. We take wine, which is considered the most spiritual, most physical, intoxicating thing, and we make kiddush out of it. We sanctify the day from it. That is the power of a mitzvah. That's what it means to be a Jew. That's what it means to get closer to Hashem. And that's what we could do in our daily lives with everything that we have. We do that with our money, with our time, with our clothing, with our speech, with our hands. We help someone out. You keep a door open, our physical hands. We just holding the door for someone. You're doing a mitzvah. You're elevating yourself. And that's what's so important and so beautiful about this verse, and there's other verses, but it's just from this week's parsha, right? This seemingly mundane mitzvah, right, really brings out the yesod, the foundation of what mitzvahs are and what we're supposed to gain out of it and how we're supposed to look at it. And when we change our glasses and we say, oh, now I understand what it is. Sorry, right? Now I understand what it is, right? What a mitzvah is, right? So then it's easier for us to start connecting to them, because if we have a better understanding and we have a relationship to it and realize that we have the power to transform a mundane thing into something spiritual, so then count me up. Let me do that, right? Let's be part of that. That's the power of what a mitzvah is and understanding what a mitzvah is. So that's what the Torah is telling us over here. Build a new house. You got to make yourself a fence, right? Seems like a mundane thing. No, that's as big of a mitzvah as fasting on Yom Kippur, right? That's as big as a mitzvah as keeping Shabbos, because the purpose of it is we having a relationship with Hashem. This one more thing, then we'll move on. And I've said this example many times, but the example I like to give, and it's going to have to start changing a little bit now that my kids are getting a little older, right? But the example I like to give is, I ask my kids to go ahead and clean up their bedroom, right? And they go and make me a nice painting, right? Or even if they go ahead and clean the playroom, right? Even if they go ahead and do something like playing, let's make me a painting, okay? But even if they go ahead and do something, are they doing the right thing? No, they're not. Because I asked them to go ahead and to clean up their bedroom. They're not listening to me, right? They're not listening to me. They're doing what they want to do. Right? And that's the power of what a mitzvah is. When we do a mitzvah, we're doing what Hashem wants us to do, and we're building that relationship, right? That's the power of a mitzvah. Okay, let's move on. Any questions or comments? Go ahead. Oh, yes. And that's a great example. And really the mitzvah before, right? The beautiful mitzvah of a bird to make to shoot away, right? To shoot away. It seems like, right? But the Torah tells us that when we do the mitzvah, we can't say that we're doing it because we're being humane. We're doing it because Hashem told us to do it. Yes, there is, everything we do is because it's part of what everything Hashem tells us to do. Yes, it's humane to do that. But we're doing it because Hashem told us to do it. The other day, I was helping unload a truck. There's like a food that comes for different people, and I was helping to unload the truck. And the truck driver was not Jewish. A very nice guy. He's from, I think, Columbia, Missouri or something like that. Columbus, Missouri. Is it Columbus, Missouri? Columbia, Missouri. He was from there. I don't know if he's met too many Jews before in his life. So we were unloading the pallets. I was in the truck helping move the pallets, and other people were taking from there. And he asked us, I was actually with Rabbi Kowalski, me and Rabbi Kowalski were unloading the truck, and he asked us, he said, so is kosher like being a vegan, right? Right, so I said, we said, not exactly, right? Right, not exactly, right? We said kosher is we eat kosher because so is it healthier? So Kowalski said there's kosher candy, not necessarily kosher is healthier either. And so we don't eat kosher because yes, slaughtering an animal is proven that it's humane, but that's not why we eat slaughter. We slaughter because Hashem told us to slaughter. We eat kosher because Hashem told us to eat kosher. Now, once we do that and we say, yes, we learn from there, it is more humane. It is, but the reason why we do it is because God told us to do it. And when we do that for that purpose, so then we don't start making our own calculations and we make our own things. And then once we start making our own calculations, well, I think this way could be a little better and that way and maybe switch it a little bit. No, God has many reasons why he does it. God knows a lot better than us what's good for us, right? And therefore, like Mike had said, like I thought it would just be better to, to clean the playroom. Thank you, but that's not what I wanted right now, right? It's a nice thing, but that's not what I wanted right now. And that's really the power of what a mitzvah is. And it's the same thing with the birds, right? The same thing with the bird, the mitzvah of shooing away the mother, right? The Talmud tells us that we can't say we're doing it because we're being merciful. That is an action that we learn from it. There is lessons that we learn. Of course, we extrapolate that and we learn from that we have to be humane, right? But it's not the reason why we do it. We do it because Hashem told us to do it. Okay, let's move on. We're going to move on to chapter 23, verse 20, page 1056. So this is one of my most favorite Dvar Torahs, and we did say this last year, but this is something that I feel has to be repeated every year, right? Rabbi Schwab makes really brings us out really nicely in his Sefer on the Torah. Right? The verse tells us, "Sasek lachicha neshach," he shall not cause your brother to take interest. Right? You're not allowed to take interest in this. We know it's a famous halacha, right? I mean, almost everybody knows you can't take interest from a Jew when you lend them money, right? Big businesses, mortgage companies, and in Eretz Yisrael they have a lot also. And even here, there's something called a heter iska, and it's a legal document that the rabbis made, right, for businesses. But really, halachically, right, it's a loophole for people that's their business, right? But you can't take. But clearly says, right? The Torah tells us clearly that you're allowed to take from a non-Jew, right? But from your brother, you're not allowed to take. And this halacha, this pasuk in the Torah has given Jews throughout the ages tremendous headache. Right? This has been used to incite persecution. This has been used by the church many times to say, look, the Jews think that they're better than us, and they can't take interest from them, from their brother, from Jew, but they could take it from a non-Jew, and it has created a lot of headaches for the Jewish people throughout the years. And Rabbi Schwab and many others, like, what is this? Why does the Torah tell us that you can't take interest from a Jew, but you could take interest from a non-Jew? Why? We just said before, everybody's creating the image of Hashem. So yes, there's certain things, of course, there's a separation between Jews and non-Jews and a lot of things, right? But this is, why this? Why interest? What's the difference between a Jew and a non-Jew? And Rabbi Schwab says something so beautiful, and I hold it so important every year to repeat this, and any opportunity that I have. He says that really the questions, we're asking the wrong question. Right? Of course, the church uses it to incite riots and things, but really the question is the other way around. Ask Rabbi Schwab, why can't you take interest from a Jew? It's business. It's just good old-fashioned business. If I lend you my house, sort of, right? I'm allowed to take rent, right? That's really what rent is. Rent is I'm lending you my house, and you're paying me for rent using my house. So interest is a dirty word. It's not. What interest is really by taking, right? Interest is I'm lending you my money. I don't have my money that I can invest right now. I can't use my money for other things, right? So I'm lending you my money. You're paying to be able to use my money, right? So ask Rabbi Schwab, the question really is the other way around. Why does the Torah tell us that we can't take interest from a Jew? Right? Of course you should be able to. So taking from a non-Jew, of course you could take from a non-Jew, right? Because interest is business, right? So the question is, why can't you take from a Jew? Says Rabbi Schwab. That's the question we should be asking. And says Rabbi Schwab that the Torah answers the question. Because the Torah always, when it speaks about interest, it always uses the word achicha, your brother. Sometimes it just says you shouldn't do this, but over here it says achicha, your brother. Says Rabbi Schwab that your family, if God forbid your kid or your brother or your parents or an extremely close friend, right, like almost like a brother, would come to you and say, "I'm stuck, right? I need a loan for a little bit. I need to redo my basement or whatever. I need $10,000." And if be able to do that, right? Are you going to think of charging them interest? No, it's like it's a thing that, okay, I have some money, Baruch Hashem gave me that, and it's in my family, right? In my family. If your family member wants to, you have a house, so whatever. So then yeah, there's some kind of, sometimes you won't charge them rent, sometimes you will charge them, but money, says Rabbi Schwab, lending money to a family member. It's not even amongst non-Jews. It's not something that's thought that family members, you won't charge them interest. That's not something that you do. It says Rabbi Schwab, he says the Torah is teaching us something so powerful. The Torah is telling us you can't take interest from achicha, your brother, because Kol Yisrael achim v'achayos. Every Jewish person is a brother and sister. If you know them, if you don't know them, if they live in Japan, in England, Toronto, Israel, West Coast, East Coast, Mexico, South Africa, it doesn't make a difference. We are brothers and sisters. So it says, Rabbi Schwab, of course, the Torah is telling us a tremendous lesson. I won't charge my immediate family. There's a Torah, every Jewish person is your immediate family. And every Jewish person is your immediate family. And if we look at each individual as our immediate family, I won't even think twice of charging it. Of course, right? So it says Rabbi Schwab, so they got it all wrong. Interest, of course, is a business thing, and of course you should. So therefore, it's not anything different than a non-Jew. And it's not saying, oh, non-Jew is worse, and therefore, we can take interest from them. This, God forbid, right? They're created in the image of Hashem, of course. You're not allowed to steal. You're not allowed to take. You're not allowed to rob a non-Jew. You can, of course, the Torah doesn't allow it just to do. Oh, they're not Jews. Chas v'shalom, of course not, because they're created in the image of Hashem, and we have to, and from us. But interest is just a regular business deal. So someone that's not family, I charge them interest, and therefore, from a non-Jew, you're allowed to take. They're not family. They're created in the image of Hashem. They're not family. But the Torah is telling us that the way we have to look at every Jew, right? We know them. They're practice the same way we practice. They don't practice the same way we practice. They're from here. They're from there. It doesn't make a difference, right? If they're from the children of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, they're family, and we don't charge interest, right? We don't charge interest, and I think this opens up such an insight in what it means when we say, right, Achenu Chal Beis Yisrael, and the Surim Mitzvah, we say after we say Tehillim, Achenu Chal Beis Yisrael, our brothers of the Jewish, all the Jewish people who are struggling, and wherever they may be, over the sea, wherever it is, Achenu Chal Beis Yisrael, we are all brothers and sisters. We are all family, and we have to look at each other that way. So it's not only in interest; it's in everything. I'll tell you an unbelievable story. When I was going to Israel, so I went for the first time I went to Israel was in 2002, right? Pesach 2002 was the first time I went for yeshiva, right? And I came back and forth. I think it was 2003, I think it was. I could look it up probably, but there was a major strike in Eretz. The airport went on a major strike. And of course, they did it like right after Pesach, where everybody's coming back for yeshiva and seminary, or everybody's coming back. And there was a major strike. Major strike. The airport was closed. They weren't sure yet if the strike was going to happen. So anybody that had a connecting flight, which back then was everybody flew non-direct. Most people flew non-direct, right? And much cheaper. Now it's like not so much cheaper. Then it was much cheaper, right? The airline said we can not tell you to go the first leg because we're not sure yet if the strike is happening. So we all had to get onto the plane. I actually flew Alitalia, right? I had friends flying through Amsterdam, through Rome, through England, through Switzerland, through everywhere, right? I had literally friends all over Europe, right? And when we landed, right? When I landed in Milan, right? They said, "Oh, there's a strike in Israel. You're stuck." Right. So happens to me, we were all very surprised. Alitalia actually put us up in a hotel, which they didn't really need to because it wasn't their fault. Right. But most of my friends told me that they were stranded. They said they all said that when they came out, they had to collect their luggage. They came out. Almost each one of them said There were Jews in the airport. Right? Everybody knew it was a time of people going to Eretz Yisrael. It was at the Bachrim, and there was Jews in the airport with signs, right? In Hebrew / Yiddish, English, whatever, with code words. It said, if you're going a Yehudi, if you're a Jew going to Israel and you're stuck, come with us, we'll help you. And the cities, every city, friends have told you, there was one in Amsterdam, there was two like big 15 passenger vans, right, that took everybody and they hosted them in the place, and the strike was for 3.5 days. Right, that's how long the strike, and they put them up and they fed them. Friends in Switzerland and friends in other places, they put them up because we are brothers and sisters. It's not a stranger. Right? There's no other nation in the world that this would happen. No other people, if you're a different ethnicity, this wouldn't happen. Wouldn't say, oh, if you're from here, come. There's no such thing. Right? I remember when there was I was probably in the early 90s or maybe late 80s, probably early 90s, late 80s. Forgot which one of the airplanes that crashed. It was crashed over the Atlantic. I remember which one it was. I was younger. But I remember my mother, I didn't remember this so much. My mother told me. So we had actually, at the time growing up, we had a downstairs neighbor in our basement who was not Jewish, right? But by the time she left, her kid was saying Shema because she lived in our house. Right? She sort of became part of our, she used to come up all the time. I had a lot of good stories from her, right? But she was upstairs when my mother heard the news, and the first thing that came out of my mother's mouth was, I hope there's no Jews on the plane. Of course, she said that no, but she said, like, so her name was Ginger. Ginger said, like, who cares if, I mean, she said, I hope there's no one I know on the plane. Like, what? So my mother said, no, every Jew is a brother and sister, right? We're all brothers and sisters. Like, even if I don't know who they are, we're all brothers and sisters. And Ginger said, I've never heard such a thing like that before. Right? If it's someone I know, it's someone I know. If I don't know them, I don't know them. Right? We are all brothers and sisters. And when we look, like, there's so many stories like this, so many stories. There was a plane that came into JFK from Eretz Yisrael, literally like a half hour before Shabbos, right? Because the plane got delayed and whatever, and it came in right before Shabbos. And Far Rockaway is the closest 5 towns. Far Rockaway, there were people waiting there on the bus, waiting there they already arranged. They had the list of people. They got the list of names of people that were Shomer Shabbos. They had a list of everybody, but whoever wanted, right? They weren't forcing on it. Whoever wanted, they arranged meals for them, places to stay, right? There's so many stories like this. And we have so many gamachs. We here in town, we have people coming to use our Bikur Cholam house from different places, right? Because we are brothers and sisters. And when we look at it that way, our whole mindset changes. Our mindset changes. How we look at it when we give a donation. How does it look at it when we want to help someone out? How we look at it when we pass someone on the street, right? If we're driving and we see it from family, we pull over and we help them. A stranger, we used to be, but now you're scared, right? You don't know who that person is, right? But it's a different level. It's your brother and sister. You want to help them out. You want to help out your brother and sister. And that's what the Torah is telling us, right? And says Rabbi Schwab, they got it all wrong. They just use it as excuses to persecute the Jewish people. But the real question is, why can't you take interest from a Jew? And the answer is because we're all brothers and sisters, and you don't take it from your brothers and sisters. And that's the important lesson that we learned from here. Okay, we have a few more minutes. Let's move on to chapter 24, verse 8. And the verse says like this. 1060 in the Hebrew and 1061 in the English. It says like this: Hishamer b'neged tziras. One has to be careful from the affliction of tziras, right? And you should go to the Kohen, right? And then the next verse says, Zachar Hashem asa lakim leMiriam b'derech b'tzeis Mitzrayim. And one should remember what Hashem did to Miriam when we were left Mitzrayim. Tziras, the affliction of tziras, leprosy, which is bad translation, right? But the affliction of tziras, as the Talmud calls us, primarily doesn't necessarily only come from, but primarily comes from speaking Lashon Hara. And says the commentaries, we know that also from the connection of remember what Hashem did to Miriam, right? It's actually in a lot of Sidurim at the end of davening, at the end of the Shachris service, there's the sixth remembrance. Right, there's 2 of them in this week's parsha. There's this one of Miriam, and there's also Amalek, which we're going to read when we read the Shabbos before Purim. Right, also the remembrance of what Amalek did for us. But this is one of the remembrance. Remember what happened to Miriam, and what did Miriam do? Miriam spoke against her brother, Lashon Hara about her brother, right? And That's one of the Talmud also says, since the two things are next to each other, we learn that tzaras comes from speaking lashon hara, from speaking evil talk about someone else. And the Torah tells us we have to remember what Hashem did to Miriam. Now, the commentaries expand on this. There's a lot to talk about lashon hara and evil talk, and we've talked about that before. I don't want to get into that too much. That could really derail into a lot of different conversations and for another time. But what I want to bring out from here is another point. Remember what Hashem did to Miriam. So the classic understanding is, remember what Hashem did to Miriam, that she had to go out of the encampment because she spoke against her brother. And the commentaries say, of course, he didn't mean in a negative way. It's her own brother. And we're talking about Miriam, who is a prophetess. We're not talking about, just some person that's jealous. We're talking about Miriam on a very high level. She was a prophetess. She sang the song of the sea for the woman. And it says after the song of the sea, Miriam put the ladies and she sang with them. We're talking about something that the water the Jewish people had in the desert was in her merit. Right? It came in her merit. We're talking about something very, very lofty. Right? So, and that's the classic, and that is true. So remember, and even that, Hashem was so careful about how she spoke and how careful we have to speak. I think there's another lesson that we could learn from here, and take out from here, and use this verse to bring this point out. There's another thing that we can remember what Hashem did. Miriam when we went out of Mitzrayim. What did Hashem do for Miriam? When Miriam was exiled from the camp because of her tzaras for the 7 days, the Torah tells us that the Jewish people did not move. The Jewish people stayed there. Right? Now, typically, right, they'll move, and you have to catch up, right? You move out of the Makana and you move along outside of the encampment, but you move along. But it says that Hashem made sure that the encampment doesn't move. And Rashi at the time says why? It says since Miriam is the one that when Moshe Rabbeinu was born, right, she's the one that waited when she put the basket into the water, into the Nile. It says that Miriam was waiting to see what will happen to him, and she went to see what's going to happen. Then she saw the daughter of Paro take him, and he wasn't nursing, so she went and said about having someone that could nurse. She's the one that waited. Hashem said that Miriam, who waited for Moshe to see what's going to happen for him, the whole Jewish people have to wait for Miriam, right, in that merit. And I think there's two things to learn from here. Number one, right, that one individual could do something so impactful that it affects the whole Jewish people over here in a positive way. Miriam did something that's so impactful that the whole Jewish people had to wait for her, right? Had to wait for her. And the other thing I think is something that we could take out and put into our practical daily life is that there's never a deed that never gets reward for. This was something so small, I don't know. No, she waited. It's her brother, right? Of course she's gonna. She's curious, right? Curious George, right? Like, come on, like if you were like having to put which I never have to, but in the Nile, I don't know. Wouldn't you be curious, like what happens and wait? No, but even though you could translate it as the curiosity of a kid, and you could translate it as this or that, but Hashem said, no. You did something positive, you did something good. You're gonna get reward for that. We should never, ever think that when we do something good, even if it seems like, one day, whatever, I helped out for kiddos. I have to eat anyways for kiddos. Whatever, I was around anyway. Never underestimate the good deeds that you do. And when we don't underestimate the good deeds that we do, and we don't become haughty from it, of course. That's not what we're saying. But we recognize that we're doing a good deed. It gives us vigor. It gives us that strength to do another good deed. And it says, no, there is reward in the world. That sometimes we see it, sometimes we don't. Sometimes it's when we come up to Shemaim, and sometimes it happens sooner than we think. Right? But it's something that we have to remind ourselves. Right? Because when we feel that and we recognize that, we see it. Remember what Hashem did to Miriam, that he found the time that he gave her the reward in this world, right? And he didn't forget about that she waited for Moshe. Right? There's always everything that we do always gets reward. Hashem doesn't forget anything, any good deed. Even if it seems a little small, we knock it down and think it's a little small. There's no good deed, right, that goes unrewarded, right? Right? There's no good deed that gets unrewarded, right? Right? Sort of play on words, right? So we have to remember that, and we have to build ourselves up, because when we do that, hopefully that gives us the energy and say, you know what? I want to do another good deed. I want to do a good, not chas v'shalom to get haughty, God forbid to get haughty, but to reinforce ourselves and to give us that strength. And also to realize that, there's certain actions and certain people that do something that's so awesome that it could affect the whole Jewish people. And we could be like that too. It doesn't have to be in this way, but it could be in a positive way. Right? There's definitely people that I know of that affect the whole Jewish people. If it's through their philanthropy, it's through their work with government. If it's through to help certain programs happen, to ensure there's less anti-Semitism, to ensure there's certain people, the founders of this shul. Right, people that spend their time and energy and their dedication to ensure that there's going to be a Orthodox synagogue in St. Louis in the early 1900s. Right, they're still their action is still living. Right, they've changed so many things. Right, and sometimes it's with a group of people, but we have that power. We have to look internally and say, what resources did Hashem give us? What strength did Hashem give us? And resources could be anything that Hashem gave us, be it if it's our influence, be it it's our power of speech, be it if it's our money, be it if it's our artistic talents, right? Whatever it is, our teaching talents, and whatever Hashem gave us, we have to look at it and say, how could I use those resources that Hashem gave me to help the Jewish people? And it might make a difference. I might be the one that we never know, but I might be the one that can make a difference in the future of one individual, one kid. Right? I could be the one that makes a difference in a few people, whoever it is. You save one soul, right, and you save the whole world. Right? You save one soul, it's considered as you save the whole world. So I think that's another thing when we say, remember what Hashem did to Miriam. Right? Of course, it's a classic of Lashon Hara, right? Of course, but I think there's other layers that we could also learn from that into our daily lives. Okay, we'll end with one more thing. One second. Okay, so there's so many more things in this week's Parsha that I would love to talk about, and really the next speaks about how we're supposed to conduct ourselves with if we lend someone. Torah tells us if you lend a poor person if you lend them money and you took collateral, their pillow or things, you have to make sure you give it to them at night and they get it back. They shouldn't be sleeping without a pillow, and that could play into our daily lives. If you take something that is a collateral that they need at a certain time, right? You have to make sure that they're not homeless or things like that. Right? In the Torah, there's a lot of these kind of things in the Torah about the almana, right? Someone that's a widower or an orphan or a convert that comes in, how we're supposed to talk to them. But I want to end with the end of this week's parsha, which we're not going to talk about this year, right? Is remembering Amalek, as we talked about what Amalek did for us, and let's talk about it very quickly. Right? We have 8 minutes. I think we'll get it in. I don't want to end with this idea, right? But why do we have to remember Amalek? What's Amalek, right? Why Amalek? What did Amalek do? Amalek were the first people when we left Egypt after the splitting of the sea. They came and attacked the Jewish people, right? They came and attacked the Jewish people, and it says that after they attacked the Jewish people, right, other nations now felt like they could attack the Jewish people. It's like even though in the Talmud tells us that they most probably knew that they were going to lose, right? They sort of just wanted to break that, sort of how Jewish people are untouchable. Look, they're touchable. Okay, we lost, but maybe someone else can win. So, but that's not a military thing. What's like this remembrance, and what's it connected to? Why do we do it before Purim? Right, so we know Haman was from Amalek, right? That's what it tells us. Haman was from Amalek. But on a deeper level, the commentaries explain that what Amalek represents, really what Amalek was trying to do was, physically to destroy the Jewish people. But it was a much deeper thing. It wasn't just a physical war. Amalek represents the lack of spirituality. They were sort of the first atheists kind of thing. There's no such thing as a higher power. Miracles explain it this way. Nowadays we have people that want to explain it was a low tide, it was a this, it was a that, right? People want to sort of how to figure things out according to science, and there's no God. There's no concept of God. And that's really what Amalek represents. And they said that's why Amalek is willing to throw themselves against the Jewish people, because since they had this belief that there must have been some kind of explanation about the plagues and how they got out of Egypt, which is a miracle in itself, because Egypt was the most powerful nation, right? And a bunch of slaves get out. No, there must be some kind of explanation, whatever it is. So maybe we could go ahead and fight them. Even maybe we'll lose, maybe we don't, but we have to show the world that they're not a superpower. Spiritually, I don't mean superpower physically, but spiritually, they're not a super nation, right? And that's what we have to remember when we're remembering to wipe out Amalek. Nowadays, yes, if we see an Amaleki, which we don't know who Amaleki is right now, because there was sort of, it says Germany was and this and that, but we don't really know, because one of the kings, Sancherib, about 100 years before the destruction of the first temple, he went ahead, and the Talmud tells us that he mingled the world. His strategy of controlling the world was that he took different nations and put them in different places. So he displaced them. Therefore, they didn't feel like it was their country and their place. That was his strategy. And so sort of, we're not sure exactly who an Amaleki really is, but okay, but that's a different story. But really for us, when we're remembering Amalek, the Zeichar of Amalek, is we're wiping out this ideology. What we have to do is we have to look internally and say we have to wipe out this ideology of saying that there's no spirituality in the world. There is spirituality in the world. And each one of us has to look internally and say, how is this ideology affecting me? Because it does. Not, God forbid, not on the spectrum of we don't believe in God. We're here listening to Torah class, right? That's at 7:55 in the evening, right? Where we could have be somewhere else. And so, of course, we believe in God. But on some level, right, it affects us. Right, it affects us. The secular world, right, affects us in some way, and we have to look internally. As I always say, there's no such thing as a true believer. There's no such thing as a true atheist. What I mean, everybody's agnostic, and we're all agnostic. To say that there's no God, how could I can't prove there's no God, right? To say that 1,000,000% there is a God, and I'll never do a sin in the world, right? I take a cup of Drano, right? Here, take it. No way, no thank you, right? You're not going to drink it. You know I took Drano, I poured it into that cup, right? I'll pay you $1 billion. You're still not going to drink it because you know you're not going to have any insides left, right? If you drink a cup of Drano. And so if we knew 1,000,000%, 100% that there is a God, means to say internally all our everything, we believe that there's a God, we'll never do a sin in the world. And that's what angels are. And so we're all on the level of, some of us are closer to the concept of believers, and therefore we live more of a lifestyle with a relationship with Hashem, and some of us live a little less, and some of us are much closer to atheists, or they claim they're atheists. But could you really prove there's no God? You can't. And so we have to look at ourselves and say, okay, where am I holding? Right? How much is this Amalek affecting us in our daily lives, and how much are we fighting that Amalek? So we could remember what Hashem did to Amalek when Amalek did to us. What is Amalek doing to us today? Right? The secular culture, the culture of just me, the culture of everything revolves around just the wealth and property and the toys and everything like that. And then, of course, those things are important, but is that how is that affecting me? And that's something that we could reflect on today. Sort of just to finish off today, because I think this is something really important just to point out. The Torah tells us a very important halacha, right? Again, along the lines that we spoke about the other day, that back in the good old days, even now, but how did they, when you bought something, put on a scale, right? And the scale was, now we have electric scales, but the scale was based with certain stones, measurements of stone, and that's how you knew. So the Torah tells us, you're not allowed to, you shall not ruin the waiters and the weight of large or small. You can't change them. The Torah goes into how careful we have to be, right, with the stones that are used to weigh the products, right? And it calls it Avnei Tzedek, right? It has to be the proper way, and therefore, and then it says, in order that you should live a long life on the land that Hashem gave you, right? And you shouldn't do bad in the eyes of Hashem, right? And the commentaries expanded this a lot, but along the same lines, that one of the sources of a relationship with Hashem is realizing that everything that we have is from Hashem. And if you realize that everything that you have is from Hashem, and it's a gift from Hashem, yes, I went to school and I worked hard and I'm a lawyer, I'm an engineer, whatever it is that I did, right? I did the time, but it's a gift from Hashem because there's people out there with 20 PhDs and they're not making anything, right? It is a gift from Hashem. So then you won't even think twice of, shaving off the weight a little bit to cheat a little bit. You're not going to cheat on your taxes. You're not going to, you're not going to try to swindle someone out. You're not going to say, well, I can't, that 10%, I don't know if I could do that. We realize that everything's from Hashem. And that's what the mitzvah is over here telling us, right? That you can't, even a sliver of a stone, right? You have to be so careful. And that's in order to live a long life. Means to say not only a physical long life, but a spiritual long life. Because when we live with this idea, and right after this parsha goes into Zachar, goes into remembering Amalek, and the two things are connected. When we live this life, that is a way of life of remembering not to be like Amalek. Because we realize that everything's from Hashem and we live our lives that way, it changes our whole mindset. It changes our whole reflection of what we have and how we use that. And Mirz Hashem, when we keep on doing this, as we get closer to Rosh Hashanah, unfortunately, I'm probably not going to be able to do class next week. But as we get closer to Rosh Hashanah, right, we should keep these things in mind, and this is what we need to be working on all, building our relationship with Hashem, right? As we start off in the beginning, we are built in the Shalom Elokim. You can't leave a body up hanging, right? We're in the image of Hashem, right? And by being the image of Hashem, we also have to live the life that Hashem wants us to live. If it's building a fence on the roof, if it's not cheating on the stones, that which reflects into our day. We might not have now stones, but that reflects on our lives, to realizing that we have to live a life of getting closer to Hashem. And that way we will live long, and God willing, we'll have a good judgment this year. Thank you all for joining us.